Ivan Milat was born Ivan Robert Marco Milat on December 27, 1944, in Guildford, New South Wales, Australia. He was the fifth of 14 children in a large Croatian-Australian family. The Milat household was tumultuous and strict, with a tough upbringing that shaped Ivan's early years. Milat's father, Stephen Milat, was a Croatian immigrant and a demanding figure known for his harsh discipline. His mother, Margaret Milat, managed the large household. The family lived in relative isolation, moving frequently and settling in areas around Sydney. The children were largely left to their own devices, developing a reputation for unruly behaviour in the local communities. From a young age, Ivan Milat exhibited antisocial and psychopathic behaviour, such as attacking animals with machetes, which led to his placement in a residential school at age 13. By 17, he was in juvenile detention for theft, and by 19, he was involved in a shop break-in. In 1964, Milat received an 18-month sentence for breaking and entering. A month after his release, he was arrested for driving a stolen car and sentenced to 2 years hard labour. In September 1967, at 22 years old, he was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment for theft. April 7, 1971, Ivan Milat prowled near the Liverpool railway station, his eyes scanning for vulnerable prey. His chance came when he spotted 2 18-year-old female hitchhikers, their youthful optimism a stark contrast to the dark intentions swirling in his mind. Brandishing a knife, he forced the terrified girls into his vehicle, the glint of the blade silencing any thoughts of resistance. The journey turned into a nightmare as Milat's sinister plans unfolded. He assaulted one of the hitchhikers, his brutality leaving deep emotional scars. Desperation fueled their every move, and when the car finally stopped at a petrol station cafe, they seized a fleeting moment of opportunity. Their escape was frantic, hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline, as they alerted authorities to the horror they had endured. Milat was swiftly arrested later that day, charged with 1 count and 2 counts of armed robbery. But even as he awaited trial, his criminal activities did not cease. Alongside some of his brothers, he embarked on a string of audacious robberies, a defiant middle finger to the law. When the net tightened, Milat executed a daring ploy to evade capture, faking his own suicide by leaving his shoes at the Gap, a notorious Sydney spot. Authorities were left baffled as Milat vanished, suspected of fleeing to Queensland and Victoria before slipping across the Tasman Sea to New Zealand. For 2 years, he lived a ghost-like existence, but whispers suggested he had secretly returned to Australia, using a fake passport to live under the radar. His ability to elude capture showcased a cunning that was as dangerous as it was frustrating for law enforcement. In 1974, a personal tragedy brought him back into the spotlight. His mother suffered a heart attack, and as she lay in the hospital, Milat was rearrested. Yet, the charges of robbery and kidnapping against him crumbled in court, thanks to the skilled defense mounted by the Milat family's lawyer, John Marsden. The legal Houdini Act allowed Milat to slip back into society. By 1975, he had taken a job as a truck driver, working intermittently for the Roads and Traffic Authority. His mundane job masked the predator within, a facade that held for nearly 2 decades. But the shadows of his past were never far behind, the disappearance of several backpackers travelling through Australia. Among the first reported missing were Deborah Everest and James Gibson, both 19, who vanished after leaving Sydney for Confest near Albury on December 30, 1989. Another case involved 21-year-old German tourist Simone Schmeidel, last seen leaving Sydney for Melbourne on January 20, 1991. Similarly, a German couple, Gabor Neugebauer, 21, and Anja Habschied, 20, disappeared after leaving a King's Cross hostel for Mildura on December 26, 1991. British backpackers Caroline Clark, 21, and Joanne Walters, 22, were last seen in King's Cross on April 18, 1992. The first alarming discovery was made in September 1992, when two runners found a partially buried corpse while orienteering in the Belanglo State Forest, southwest of Sydney. The following morning, police discovered a second body 30 metres from the first. Dental records identified the bodies as those of Clark and Walters. Walters had suffered 15 stab wounds, while Clark had been shot 10 times, likely used for target practice. Investigators faced a daunting task. The isolation and size of the forest made it difficult to locate evidence and ascertain the extent of the crimes. However, the discovery of the bodies prompted police to search the area thoroughly. By October 5, 1993, a local man found bones while searching for firewood in a remote section of Belanglo. Police quickly identified the bodies as those of Gibson and Everest. Gibson's skeleton, found in a fetal position, showed 8 stab wounds, including a severed spine. Everest had been savagely beaten, with multiple skull fractures and a broken jaw. Investigators were puzzled, as Gibson's camera and backpack had previously been found far north in Galston Gorge. On November 1, 1993, a police sweep uncovered another skeleton in Belanglo, identified as Schmidl. She had at least 8 stab wounds, with some severing her spine. Clothing found at the scene matched those of another missing backpacker, Anya Habshid. Just days later, on November 4th, the bodies of Habshid and Neugebauer were found in shallow graves nearby. Habshid had been decapitated, and her skull was never found. Neugebauer had been shot in the head 6 times. The grisly nature of the murders and the pattern of violence suggested that a serial killer was at work. Evidence showed that some victims had been brutalized, prompting the establishment of Task Force Air on October 14, 1993. The New South Wales government offered a $500,000 reward for information. With an overwhelming volume of data, investigators used advanced link analysis technology to narrow down a suspect list from 230 to 32 individuals. This method involved analysing connections between suspects and the victims, including geographical locations and behavioural patterns. Speculation arose about the possibility of multiple killers due to the varied methods of murder and separate burials. On November 13th, police received a crucial tip from Paul Onions in the UK. On January 25, 1990, Onions had been backpacking in Australia when he accepted a ride from a man known as Bill. South of Mittagong, near Belanglo, Bill pulled out a revolver and rope to rob Onions, who managed to escape and report the incident to the Booral police. This lead was corroborated by Joanne Berry, a motorist who helped Onions, and the girlfriend of a man who worked with Milat. On February 26, 1994, police began surveillance on Ivan Milat's house. Milat, a road worker with a history of violence and a fascination with weapons, quickly became the prime suspect. His peculiar behaviour and the fact that he had given rides to hitchhikers in the areas where the victims were last seen made him a person of intense interest. Milat was arrested on May 22, 1994, after police executed a search warrant at his home. The search yielded a treasure trove of incriminating evidence, including items belonging to the victims, such as sleeping bags, cameras, and clothing. Additionally, firearms matching the type used in the murders were found, further linking Milat to the crimes. Homes of Milat's family members were also searched, uncovering more victim belongings. Milat was charged with 7 counts of murder on May 31, 1994. His trial began on March 26, 1996, in the Supreme Court of New South Wales. Despite overwhelming evidence, Milat claimed innocence, arguing that the prosecution needed to prove his guilt. His defence attempted to shift blame onto other family members. The trial lasted several weeks, during which the jury heard harrowing details about the murders and the suffering of the victims. The prosecution's case was bolstered by forensic evidence and the testimony of a key witness, Paul Onions, a British backpacker who had escaped an attack by Milat in 1990. Onions' testimony was pivotal in linking Milat to the crimes and showcasing his modus operandi. Ultimately, the jury found Milat guilty on July 27, 1996, of 7 counts of murder. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The conviction brought some closure to the families of the victims, though the horror of the crimes left a lasting scar on the community and the nation. Milat faced a tough time in prison. On his first day at Maitland Jail, he was beaten by another inmate. He attempted to escape with convicted drug dealer George Savas in 1997, but the plan failed, and Savas was found hanged the next day. In 2001, he was transferred to a high-security unit at Goulburn Correctional Centre, and a public outcry followed when he received a toaster and television in his cell. In 2009, Milat severed his little finger with a plastic knife, intending to mail it to the High Court to force an appeal. He had previously harmed himself by swallowing razor blades and metal objects. In 2011, he went on a 9-day hunger strike to get a PlayStation, losing 25 kilograms in the process. In May 2019, Milat was diagnosed with terminal esophageal cancer and transferred to the Prince of Wales Hospital. Despite intensive treatment, his condition worsened, and he was moved to the Long Bay Correctional Centre. Milat died from esophageal and stomach cancer on October 27, 2019, at the age of 74. Despite numerous attempts by police to elicit a confession, he never admitted to his crimes. His body was cremated, and the costs were deducted from his prison account. Despite the end of his appeals and the ongoing speculation about additional victims, Milat remained unrepentant and steadfastly maintained his innocence until his death in 2019. His lack of remorse and refusal to cooperate with authorities left many questions unanswered and numerous families without closure. Investigators believe Milat could have been involved in more murders than the 7 for which he was convicted. Task Force Air compared Milat's profile to other cold cases, and experts suggest he likely killed before 1989. His brother Richard once opined there were heaps more bodies out there. Several unsolved cases were investigated for potential links to Milat. Karen Rowland, an expectant mother, went missing in 1971. Her body was found in Canberra, and Milat allegedly boasted about the murder. Peter Letcher, 18, was found handcuffed and shot near Jenolan Caves in 1988. Diane Panacchio, 29, disappeared in 1991. Her body was found in Talaganda State Forest, with stab wounds consistent with Milat's modus operandi. Other cases, including the disappearances of young women in the Hunter region in the late 1970s and early 1980s, were also investigated, but remain unsolved. Despite Milat's death, the full extent of his crimes may never be known. Harold Frederick Shipman, born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England, came to be known by the infamous nickname Dr. Death. He worked as a general practitioner, a career that would later be overshadowed by his notorious actions. Harold's early life began in humble surroundings, growing up in a council estate with his working-class, religious parents. His father supported the family as a lorry driver, while his mother stayed home as a homemaker. Despite the modest circumstances, Harold's mother was known to be very controlling. Among her 3 children, Harold, the middle child, was her favorite. He was an intelligent young boy who managed to attend High Pavement Grammar School for his 6th form education. His academic prowess set him apart, and he became the first in his family to attend university. By the age of 17, Harold's mother had passed away. Their close bond made her death profoundly impactful on him. He witnessed her suffering from lung cancer, with a doctor administering morphine at home to ease her pain. This experience likely influenced Harold's future. In September 1965, he enrolled at Leeds University Medical School, marking the beginning of his journey into the medical profession. On his way to medical school, Harold met a woman called Primrose, whom he later married. After graduating in 1970, Harold gained employment as a GP in Todmorden, near the West Yorkshire border with Rochdale. However, in 1974, he was dismissed after being found slumped in his car with a prescription drug he should not have had. He was prosecuted for possessing pethidine, a synthetic opioid commonly given to women in labour. This was the first sign of Harold abusing his power as a medical professional. Harold's killing spree began in the mid-1970s, but it wasn't until the 1990s that his murders became more frequent and noticeable. He primarily targeted elderly women, often those living alone, which allowed him to operate with minimal suspicion. Harold administered lethal doses of diamorphine, a medical-grade heroin, to his victims, which he then covered up as natural causes or sudden heart failures. One of his early known victims was 73-year-old Hilda West, who died on March 5, 1975. Over the next 2 decades, Shipman's list of victims grew. Each death followed a similar pattern: sudden, unexpected, and under Shipman's sole care. He often encouraged cremation, which destroyed potential evidence. Shipman's method of operation was alarmingly consistent, showcasing a methodical and calculated approach to murder. He maintained meticulous control over his practice, which allowed him to target his victims with precision. His typical modus operandi involved visiting his patients in their homes under the pretense of routine checkups or to administer supposed pain relief. Shipman would inject his patients with a fatal dose of diamorphine, exploiting his medical knowledge to ensure the dosage was lethal. This drug, a powerful opioid, was commonly used in palliative care, making it less suspicious when found in medical contexts. After administering the drug, Shipman would often stay until the victim died, ensuring that the cause of death appeared natural. He would then falsify medical records to support the supposed natural cause of death, usually citing heart attacks or old age-related conditions. By completing the death certificates himself, Shipman avoided scrutiny and maintained a veneer of legitimacy. His role as a trusted family doctor meant that his suggestions were rarely questioned, allowing him to cover his tracks effectively. Irene Turner, another victim, died on July 9, 1996. Her death followed the same pattern, with Shipman injecting her with a lethal dose and documenting her death as due to natural causes. Her family, trusting Shipman, did not question the circumstances. A particularly notable case was that of Kathleen Grundy, a former mayor of Hyde. Grundy, who was found dead on June 24, 1998, became a pivotal figure in Shipman's downfall. Shipman had not only murdered her, but also forged her will to inherit a significant portion of her estate. This blatant greed led to intense scrutiny and ultimately uncovered his series of crimes. Her daughter's suspicion and the subsequent discovery of forged documents brought Shipman's crimes to light. The exhumation and toxicology report revealing lethal levels of diamorphine were crucial in exposing his murderous activities. Suspicion first began to mount in the early 1990s, when local undertakers noticed a higher-than-average number of cremation forms signed by Shipman. They observed a pattern. Most of the deceased were elderly women who had died suddenly and unexpectedly, often shortly after Shipman had visited them. Relatives of the deceased also began expressing concerns. In 1998, Dr. Linda Reynolds of the Brook Surgery in Hyde alerted the local coroner, John Pollard, about the high death rates among Shipman's patients. The matter was initially investigated but yielded no concrete evidence, allowing Shipman to continue his killing spree. Investigators began to identify a disturbing pattern. Many of Shipman's patients had died in similar circumstances. They were often found sitting fully dressed or in unusual locations within their homes, and Shipman had been the last person to see them alive. Additionally, a significant number of these patients had medical records that Shipman had altered posthumously to suggest they were terminally ill or had requested no resuscitation, which justified the use of diamorphine. The police examined Shipman's prescription records and discovered that he had been ordering large quantities of diamorphine, far more than necessary for his medical practice. They also found that he had been stockpiling the drug, diverting it for his own purposes. Investigators interviewed families of deceased patients, many of whom had initially accepted Shipman's explanations, but began to question the circumstances of their loved ones' deaths as the investigation unfolded. An unexpected ally in the investigation was Shipman's computer. It was found that Shipman had been altering medical records on his computer after the deaths of his patients. This digital tampering was crucial in establishing a timeline and proving that Shipman had premeditated the murders and attempted to cover them up by falsifying records. In September 1998, he was arrested and charged with 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery related to Kathleen Grundy's will. The trial began in October 1999 at Preston Crown Court. The prosecution presented compelling evidence, including the exhumation results, testimony from pharmacists, digital evidence of record tampering, and patterns of Shipman's behavior. On January 31, 2000, Shipman was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment with a recommendation that he never be released. The exposure of Shipman's crimes had far-reaching consequences. It led to a major public inquiry chaired by Dame Janet Smith, resulting in the Shipman Inquiry Reports. These reports highlighted significant failures in the medical regulatory systems and recommended extensive reforms to prevent such abuses in the future. Changes included better monitoring of doctors, stricter prescription controls, improved death certification processes, and the establishment of the National Clinical Assessment Authority to oversee medical professionals' conduct. Dr. Harold Shipman's case is a grim reminder of the potential for abuse within positions of trust. His actions resulted in the loss of countless lives and prompted significant changes in medical practices and regulations to restore and maintain trust in the healthcare system. The lessons learned from Shipman's crimes emphasize the importance of vigilance, accountability, and unwavering commitment to patient welfare in the medical profession. Lava lamps are the ultimate retro fun decor, bringing a groovy vibe straight from the 60s into your living room, but they can pose serious risks when misused. One unfortunate example is Philip Quinn, who discovered this too late. Philip Quinn, a 24-year-old man from Kent, Washington, found himself in a risky situation when he left a lava lamp on a heated stove in his trailer home. Whether it was intentional or accidental remains unknown, but it's speculated that he may have placed the lava lamp on the stove to heat it up. However, lava lamps are specifically designed to be gently heated by the low-wattage bulb within their base. When subjected to the intense and uneven heat of a stove, the liquid and wax inside the lamp can rapidly overheat, leading to a dangerous buildup of pressure. Unfortunately, in Philip's case, this pressure caused the glass to shatter explosively, resulting in a large shard piercing his heart, which proved fatal. He staggered into his bedroom, where he was later found deceased. Freak accidents are terrifyingly unpredictable. They can happen anywhere, anytime, turning the ordinary into the terrifying in an instant. In a whimsical twist of fate that seemed ripped from the pages of a fairy tale, fate had far darker intentions for a hard-working man. It was a scene reminiscent of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. In the heart of Camden, New Jersey, disaster befell at the Cocoa Services Inc. plant, shattering the ordinary routine of a Wednesday morning. Vincent Smith II, a 29-year-old temporary worker, never expected his life to end in such a tragic manner. It was a routine task, loading solid pieces of chocolate into the melting vat, where they would be transformed into the sweet concoctions beloved by many. But in an instant, the routine turned deadly. As Vincent emptied the chocolate into the vat, a misstep on the platform caused him to lose his footing. With a horrifying lurch, he plummeted into the depths of the 2.5-meter deep unit, where the molten chocolate churned and roiled at a scorching temperature of about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The cacophony of machinery drowned out any cries for help as Vincent was struck by the relentless paddles, delivering a fatal blow to his head. His colleagues, stunned by the sudden turn of events, rushed to shut down the mixer, but their efforts were in vain. By the time they reached Vincent, it was too late. He had succumbed to the brutal force of the machinery and the scalding heat of the chocolate. On the morning of July 6, 1999, SeaWorld staff made a shocking discovery. The lifeless, naked body of 27-year-old Daniel Dukes draped across the back of Tilikum, the massive orca. This tragic event is perhaps the most perplexing of the 3 deaths attributed to Tilikum. Daniel Dukes had somehow ended up in Tilikum's pool overnight, despite SeaWorld's numerous cameras and regular visual checks. The Orange County Sheriff's report details that the shift change occurred at 4 a.m., yet neither the departing nor the incoming night watch noticed any unusual activity or noise in the G pool, also known as the breeding and research pool. Michael Doherty, a physical therapist at SeaWorld, was the first to discover Dukes at 7:20 a.m. However, Arturo Cordoba Jr., who arrived at work at 6:55 a.m., had already begun cleaning around the G pool by 7:05 a.m., but did not notice anything amiss. Cordoba later informed the sheriff that the body he observed was unclothed, making it difficult to identify if it was male or female. Dougherty noticed Dukes's feet draped over Tilikum's left side and climbed upstairs to see a white male without clothes, showing signs of livor mortis and rigor mortis. Paramedic Jimmy Rotondi, who arrived on the scene at 7:30 a.m., confirmed Dukes had no pulse or respiration and noted multiple abrasions and lacerations on his body. The autopsy report revealed that Dukes had endured significant trauma, including torn swim trunks and avulsion of his pubic area. Divers later entered the pool to retrieve additional items, finding pieces of Dukes' swim trunks and 3 pieces of human tissue. The exact reasons why Daniel Dukes ended up in Tilikum's pool at SeaWorld remain unclear. What is known is that Dukes had managed to stay in the park after closing hours. Some speculate that he might have hidden inside the park with the intention of swimming with the orca. Dukes had a history of fascination with marine life, and SeaWorld's presentations often emphasized a seemingly close and benign connection between humans and whales, which might have influenced his actions. SeaWorld's narrative and the details provided by the Orange County Sheriff's report suggest that Dukes climbed into the tank overnight. The combination of these factors points to a tragic misjudgment on Dukes's part, influenced by an assumed sense of kinship with the orca, ultimately leading to his untimely death. On December 16, 2015, Air India flight AI-6119 was involved in a devastating incident that revealed a series of critical oversights. The flight, scheduled to depart from Mumbai to Hyderabad, faced significant delays due to a late incoming flight from Rajkot. The pilots, who had just completed the Rajkot-Mumbai flight, were already running behind schedule. The Rajkot flight, meant to arrive at 8:10 p.m., did not land until 8:35 p.m., well past the departure time for AI-6119. In their rush to make up for lost time, the pilots quickly moved to prepare the aircraft for departure. During this hurried process, a grave error occurred. The aircraft started to taxi while ground staff were still in proximity to the plane. Ravi Subramanian, a technician, was tragically pulled into the aircraft's engine. His death was instantaneous and gruesome, leaving his colleagues in shock. Further complicating the situation, the aircraft maintenance engineer, AME, whose presence is mandatory during the aircraft's pushback, was not at the scene. This absence was a critical failure in the safety protocol. Additionally, there was confusion regarding the thumbs-up signal, a vital visual confirmation from the ground crew indicating that it was safe for the aircraft to move. The co-pilot believed he had received this signal, but ground crew members later reported that no such signal was given. Adding to the chaotic circumstances, an off-duty Air India pilot travelling as a passenger received clearance from air traffic control to proceed, which was another breach of standard procedures. The investigation into the incident recommended that a mandatory 30-minute interval be enforced between flights to allow the crew adequate time for necessary checks and to prevent such hurried, dangerous operations. The SARS epidemic of 2002-2003 originated in Guangdong, China, caused by the SARS coronavirus. It spread globally via international travel, causing severe pneumonia-like symptoms. The outbreak resulted in over 8,000 cases and nearly 800 deaths. People reacted with widespread fear, leading to travel restrictions, school closures, and public health measures like quarantines and mask wearing. During the SARS outbreak, a tragic incident in Taiwan highlighted the extreme measures some individuals took to avoid infection. A 45-year-old woman died after soaking in a bathtub filled with 40.5% ethanol, believing it would protect her from the virus. According to a 2005 report in Forensic Science International, she immersed herself in the alcohol around 11 p.m. and was discovered deceased by her family the following morning. Her blood alcohol concentration, BAC, reached 1.35%, significantly higher than the legal threshold. This BAC level suggested she absorbed around 1.5 litres of 40% ethanol. Though rare, there are instances of people surviving such high BAC levels with medical intervention, such as dialysis. The woman's head was above the fluid, indicating she did not ingest a large amount. There were no signs of trauma, drug use, or drowning, suggesting that the alcohol was absorbed through her skin and inhaled. Although skin absorption of ethanol is rare, it can happen, and inhalation could have heightened her intoxication. The high BAC severely impacted her central nervous system, leading to respiratory failure and death. Her ability to climb out of the bathtub would have been impaired as her intoxication levels increased, ultimately trapping her in a fatal situation. The woman likely believed that ethanol would help her due to its widespread use as a disinfectant. During the SARS outbreak, there was significant public fear and misinformation about how to prevent infection. Ethanol is known to kill many types of germs and viruses on surfaces, and she might have mistakenly thought that bathing in it would disinfect her body in the same way. Jasmine Beaver, a lively 16-year-old girl from Skegness, tragically passed away after swallowing her own hair, leading to the formation of an infected hairball in her stomach. This hairball caused an ulcer to develop, which eventually burst, leading to the failure of her vital organs. Jasmine, described by friends and family as bubbly and caring, lost consciousness at college and was rushed to the hospital after her condition worsened at home, where she developed blotchy red skin and symptoms of peritonitis, an inflammation of the abdomen's tissue. Despite being resuscitated for 15 minutes, Jasmine sadly succumbed to her condition. Jasmine had been chewing and sucking on her hair for years, a habit stemming from trichotillomania. Trichophagia is a condition characterized by the repeated eating of hair. It is often linked with trichotillomania, a compulsion to pull out hair from the scalp. These conditions frequently occur together, and having either or both can increase the risk of developing Rapunzel syndrome. People engage in trichophagia and trichotillomania due to psychological factors like anxiety and stress, emotional factors such as self-soothing, and biological factors including genetic predisposition and neurological imbalances. These behaviors can also develop from habit formation and as coping mechanisms for childhood trauma or abuse. They are often linked to obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, and can provide temporary relief or satisfaction. Have you ever lost something in a movie theater where it's so dark you can't see a thing? You bend down, head lowered, trying to feel around for the lost item. Normally, you'd use your phone's flashlight to help. But what if it's your phone that's lost? Who would have thought that something as simple as this could lead to such a significant problem? A simple trip to the movies turned into a nightmare for 24-year-old Atiq Rafiq, a father of one from Aston, Birmingham. On that fateful day in March 2018, Atiq and his wife, Aisha Sardar, were at the View Cinema in Birmingham's Star City complex, enjoying a film in the luxurious gold-class seating area. After the movie ended, Atiq bent down to retrieve his phone and keys that had slipped under his seat, unaware that this ordinary action would lead to a devastating outcome. As Atiq searched under the seat, the automatic footrest suddenly lowered, trapping his head and neck beneath it. The force applied by the footrest was immense, equivalent to 3/4 of a ton, which left him unable to free himself. The inquest revealed that the seat was missing a crucial bar that would have allowed the footrest to be lifted manually, a component that was supposed to be included in the motor replacement kits sent by the manufacturer, Figueres International. Despite the frantic efforts of the cinema staff, who spent 15 minutes trying to release Atiq, and his wife's desperate attempts to help, the situation quickly deteriorated. Atiq lost consciousness and turned blue, suffering catastrophic brain injuries. He was resuscitated at the hospital, but tragically, he passed away a week later due to the severe damage. The inquest into Atiq's death uncovered a series of missed safety checks and failures in maintenance. The health and safety executive highlighted that if the seat had been fitted with the proper bar, Atiq could have been released by hand, potentially saving his life. Coroner Emma Brown expressed her concern over the serious risk posed by the double-acting actuator mechanism, which prevented the footrest from being lifted manually. Cinema staff recalled the chaotic moments trying to free Atiq, with one worker admitting to freezing in panic, not knowing how to release him. It took a wrench to eventually loosen the footrest, but by then, the damage was done. Atiq's wife and the cinema staff watched in horror as he was finally freed, but already severely injured. View Cinemas expressed their shock and sadness over the tragic incident and pledged to reflect on the inquest's findings. View Cinemas were fined £750,000 for safety breaches and ordered to pay £130,000 in costs. It was a cold December evening in 2013 in the quiet town of McLeod, Oklahoma. The holiday season was in full swing, but for Bradley Davis, a 33-year-old Marine veteran, the festive atmosphere was overshadowed by a lingering tension at home. His mother was recovering in the hospital from hip surgery, and he had come to stay the night at the trailer she shared with his stepfather, 58-year-old Denver Lee St. Clair. The two men, despite their shared connection, had never seen eye to eye, and that night, their simmering animosity would reach a fatal boiling point. Inside the modest trailer, a verbal altercation erupted between Davis and St. Clair. Sinclair, in a foul mood, began to hurl insults about Davis's mother. The words stung, igniting a fury in Davis. He accused his stepfather of being a bully, and the argument quickly escalated. According to Davis, St. Clair swung at him, and in the heat of the moment, Davis fought back. What happened next was a horrifying twist that no one could have anticipated. In a bid to humiliate St. Clair, Davis resorted to an extreme prank, an atomic wedgie. This wasn't a schoolyard joke, but a malicious act of pulling St. Clair's underwear over his head and securing it around his neck. The elastic band of the underwear cut into St. Clair's throat, causing him to gasp for breath. Davis, believing he had subdued his stepfather, took a photo of the humiliating scene. But the prank turned deadly when the band of the underwear strangled St. Clair, suffocating him. The aftermath was gruesome. St. Clair lay motionless, and the reality of what had occurred began to sink in. Davis called 911, but it was too late. The authorities arrived to find St. Clair dead, his body bearing not only the signs of strangulation, but also blunt force trauma to the head, injuries that indicated the altercation had been more violent than Davis initially described. As the investigation unfolded, Davis's claims of an unintended death were met with skepticism. The photos he had taken and the severity of St. Clair's injuries suggested a level of premeditation and brutality. The prosecutors argued that the atomic wedgie was not a simple prank gone wrong, but a deliberate act of violence. Davis, they contended, had not only fought with St. Clair, but had taken a perverse satisfaction in his stepfather's suffering, evident from the photographic evidence he had captured. Facing overwhelming evidence, Davis pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter. He admitted to causing his stepfather's death, but maintained that he had never intended for it to happen. Despite his plea, the judge was unyielding. The nature of the crime, combined with Davis's actions during and after the incident, led to a harsh sentence. In 2015, Davis was sentenced to 30 years in prison, a punishment that reflected the court's view of the crime's severity. The story of the atomic wedgie death quickly spread, capturing public attention due to its bizarre and tragic nature. This case highlighted the potential lethality of actions that might seem juvenile or harmless, and underscored the devastating consequences that can arise from domestic conflicts. In the quiet aftermath, the small town of McLeod was left to grapple with the shock and sadness of the incident. For many, the case of Bradley Davis and Denver Lee St. Clair was not just a story of a prank gone wrong, but a stark illustration of the thin line between anger and violence, a line that, once crossed, can lead to irrevocable tragedy. Sarah Boon's life was forever changed on February 24, 2020, when she made a frantic 911 call reporting her boyfriend, Jorge Torres Jr., was dead. She claimed they had been drinking and playing a game of hide-and-seek, during which Torres hid in a suitcase. She said she fell asleep, forgetting about him, and discovered him unresponsive the next morning. When police arrived at the couple's apartment in Winter Park, Florida, they found Jorge Torres Jr. deceased inside a blue suitcase. At first, her account of the events seemed plausible, albeit tragic. She insisted they were both heavily intoxicated, and what had started as a playful game had ended in unintended death. However, as investigators delved deeper into the case, her story began to unravel, revealing a much darker reality. Evidence collected from her cell phone starkly contradicted her initial claims. Disturbing videos found on her phone showed Torres trapped inside the suitcase, pleading for his life and repeatedly telling her that he couldn't breathe. Her responses to his desperate cries were chillingly callous. She taunted him, saying, "For everything you've done to me, stupid," and, "Oh, that's what I feel like when you cheat on me." These videos depicted a scenario far removed from a tragic accident, suggesting deliberate cruelty and malice. The autopsy conducted on Torres revealed significant injuries that further cast doubt on her story. Torres had a bruised eye, a cut lip, and various other injuries that were inconsistent with simply being trapped in a suitcase. These findings suggested that there might have been a struggle before Torres ended up in the suitcase. Her initial explanation did not align with the physical evidence, and her demeanor in the videos painted a harrowing picture of intentional harm. She was subsequently arrested and charged with second-degree murder. Her legal journey has been fraught with challenges from the outset. She has faced multiple changes in legal representation, with several attorneys withdrawing from her case, citing irreconcilable differences and conflicts of interest. She herself has expressed frustration with her legal counsel, often writing letters to the judge overseeing her case to complain about her attorney's lack of communication and dedication to her defense. As the investigation continued, more details about Boon and Torres's relationship came to light. In June 2018, she was arrested on a battery charge of strangulation against Torres, and he was also charged with battery following an incident at their home. Sarah Boon's defense claims her actions were a result of prolonged abuse and psychological trauma inflicted by Jorge Torres Jr. They intend to present evidence of mutual domestic violence to explain her behavior on the night of his death. However, videos on her phone, where she taunts Torres and ignores his pleas for help, suggest deliberate cruelty rather than self-defense. This evidence poses a significant challenge to her defense, strengthening the prosecution's argument and highlighting the dangers of domestic violence. The trial will explore these complexities. Near the vibrant city of Barcelona, near Catalonia, Spain. It was a warm, sunny afternoon when a father and his young son decided to take a leisurely walk through the local park. As they strolled past an array of sculptures and statues, the child's attention was drawn to a large, imposing papier-mâché stegosaurus, its vivid colours glistening under the sun. The boy tugged at his father's hand, leading him closer to the prehistoric giant. As they neared the statue, an unpleasant odour filled the air, prompting the father to cover his nose. Curious and concerned, he peered through a crack in the stegosaurus's hind leg. What he saw made his heart race, a figure wedged tightly inside. He quickly realised it was a human body. Authorities were immediately called to the scene. Police officers and firefighters arrived promptly, their faces grim as they assessed the situation. The crowd that had gathered watched in stunned silence as firefighters began to carefully cut the statue apart to extract the body. The man inside was identified as a 39-year-old local resident who had been reported missing only a few hours before the grim discovery. Initial police investigations ruled out foul play. A police representative speculated that the man had accidentally dropped his mobile phone inside the statue and had crawled in headfirst to retrieve it. Tragically, he became stuck, unable to free himself from the confined space. It was believed that the man had been trapped for several days, his cries for help unheard by passers-by. The once vibrant and playful stegosaurus had become a silent tomb. The man's family, devastated by the loss, received an outpouring of support from neighbours and friends. They found some solace in knowing that the mystery of his disappearance had been solved, but the manner of his death left an indelible mark on their hearts. In the days that followed, the park remained unusually quiet. Visitors passed by the remains of the stegosaurus with a mixture of reverence and sorrow, paying silent tribute to the man whose life had ended in such an unexpected and tragic manner. In January 2023, a terrible accident claimed the life of Leandro Matias de Novaes, a 40-year-old lawyer and TikTok influencer from São Paulo, Brazil. Leandro was well known for his engaging online presence, where he shared various aspects of his life with a large following. However, his life took a devastating turn during a routine visit to a medical facility. On January 16th, Leandro accompanied his mother to Laboratorio Cura for an MRI scan. The visit was meant to be straightforward, ensuring his mother received the necessary medical imaging. MRI machines are known for their powerful magnetic fields, which are essential for producing detailed images of the body's internal structures. Because of this, strict protocols are in place to prevent any metallic objects from entering the MRI room, as they can be hazardous. Upon arrival, both Leandro and his mother were briefed about these safety protocols. The staff instructed them to leave any metallic items outside the MRI suite. Additionally, they were required to sign a term of acknowledgement confirming their understanding of these instructions. Despite these precautions, Leandro carried a concealed firearm into the room, neglecting to disclose its presence to the medical staff. As the MRI machine was activated, the powerful magnetic force instantly pulled the firearm from Leandro's waistband. The gun discharged upon impact with the machine, and the bullet struck Leandro in the abdomen. The sudden and violent incident left everyone in shock, and emergency responders were immediately called to the scene. Leandro was swiftly transferred to the hospital's intensive care unit, where he received urgent medical attention. The severity of his injuries required constant monitoring and intensive treatment. For several days, Leandro fought for his life, but despite the best efforts of the medical team, he succumbed to his injuries on February 6, 2023. The incident was widely reported in the media, drawing attention to the critical importance of adhering to safety guidelines in medical environments. The Order of Attorneys of Brazil in Cotia expressed their condolences, stating, "It is with deep regret that OAB Cotia communicates to all fellow lawyers the unexpected loss of our dear friend and lawyer, Dr. Leandro Matias de Novaes. We are sorry for the loss, and we sympathize with his family in this moment of pain." Laboratorio Cura also issued a statement, emphasizing that all necessary accident prevention protocols had been followed by their team. They reiterated that both Leandro and his mother had been informed about the metallic contraindications and had acknowledged these warnings in writing. Despite these measures, the concealed firearm went undisclosed. MRI machines, while invaluable for diagnostic purposes, can become deadly when safety guidelines are ignored. This tragic event underscores the critical need for full compliance with safety instructions to prevent similar accidents in the future. Leandro Matias de Novaes left behind a legacy on social media and a grieving family who had to come to terms with the sudden and avoidable nature of his death. His story has resonated with many, highlighting the importance of vigilance and adherence to safety measures in all aspects of life. In a truly bizarre incident in Alwar, Rajasthan, 82-year-old Shivdayal Sharma lost his life in what can only be described as a freak accident. The retired railway employee was relieving himself near the railway tracks when a Vande Bharat express train collided with a stray cow. The impact of the collision was so forceful that the cow was launched approximately 100 feet into the air, ultimately landing on Sharma, who was standing about 30 meters away from the point of collision. Sharma died instantly from the impact. The incident took place near the Kalimori Gate in Alwar around 8 p.m. Another person who was also present near the tracks narrowly escaped being hit by the flying cow. The tragic event underscores the ongoing issue of cattle wandering onto railway tracks in India, a problem that has seen numerous incidents reported across various routes. Shivdayal Sharma had retired from his position as an electrician with the Indian Railways 22 years ago. Following the accident, local police transferred Sharma's body to the General Hospital's mortuary, and it was later handed over to his family after a post-mortem examination. This unusual accident has sparked conversations about the safety measures along railway tracks in India. Railway officials have been implementing various strategies to prevent such incidents, including erecting fences and frequent whistling by trains in areas prone to cattle crossing. Despite these efforts, the frequency of such accidents remains a concern, prompting calls for more stringent safety protocols to protect both human and animal lives.